All right. If you're big in the real estate industry, home building industry, just waiting to see how this all factors out, you probably like the Senate tax measure a little bit more, only because it keeps the mortgage interest deduction, or at least up to the $1 million limit we have right now, and doesn't cut it in half as the House plan does. National Association of Homebuilders CEO Jerry Howard here will check us on that. How do you feel about the Senate plan right now, Jerry?
Well, you're exactly right, Neil. We feel like it's a step in the right direction. Keeping the mortgage interest deduction limits at $1 million will help some in high-cost areas. But most importantly, on the housing side of that bill, leaving the ability of governments to issue tax-exempt bonds for affordable rental housing will really help make sure that the rental housing market doesn't go in the tank for affordable on the affordable side. So we do like the Senate bill better. I can't say that we're in love with it because it still puts downward pressure on house prices. Our economists estimate that both the Senate and the House bill will put such downward pressure that people's house values will decline by somewhere between 4% and 7%, depending on where you are geographically.
Just because they have, because the tax status isn't lost, it's just not as big, right?
It's not as big, but the real issue is at the high end of the market, the house values will probably decline somewhat, and that puts downward pressure on every price point, sort of like what we talked about earlier in the week, yeah.
So play this out then. One of these measures is going to become law, assuming it passes, or it could be a blend. You could argue that as long as interest rates stay low, and I think most Americans, there is sort of a kinship with housing, having a roof over your head that's yours. You don't think that wins out just that security that's ingrained in our culture? Because there was a time when housing didn't enjoy the tax status and benefits it does now.
Well, actually, the mortgage interest deduction, as a deduction available to anyone who wanted to itemize, has been in the code since its inception. So that's been there a long time. I guess what we're concerned about, Neil, is the fact that affordability for first-time home buyers, the people who really drive the market, is getting more and more and more difficult. And that's why we proposed, in addition to the standard deduction being doubled, that they create a home ownership tax credit, which people could take, target it to the middle class, keep the upward pressure on house prices from the bottom, make it truly a benefit to the middle class, sort of like Jerry was talking about earlier. The middle class really isn't getting that much. Give them a home ownership tax credit. Good social policy, good economic policy, and we can do it cost effectively.
You know, the other argument you hear from the other side then, Jerry, is a rising tide lifts all boats, you know, an improving economy that suddenly picks up pace and grows at a steady, you know, spurt of 3% or more. And we see the markets benefiting, we see people's personal wealth benefiting, that will offset your concerns, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. What do you say?
They say that, but my concern is that most Americans, most baby boomers in particular, who are getting ready to retire, have invested in their home as their primary cornerstone for their investment, for their retirement, rather.
Right.
Now you have these people getting ready to retire, and you're saying that they're going to lose house values by as much as 7%. And by the way, some of the other organizations out there say it could be as much as 10%. I don't think that getting a little bit of a break on your tax bill for a short period of time is worth risking the value that you've been building up in your home over the course of your career.
What about interest rates?
Obviously, low interest rates help, and low interest rates could help the marketplace. But why gamble when you don't have to? That's the question we're asking everybody. There's a way to insure against this if people will just stop, recognize the value of housing, that the housing sector is as important as the corporate sector, and let's make sure that tax reform does its job for both.
Jerry, are you going to target those congressmen, senators who vote for this?
We are leaving all of our options on the table, Neil. We have to.
Which means you would.
We haven't made that decision yet, but all options are on the table.
Jerry, thank you very much for taking the time.
Have a good weekend.